Welcome to Book of Engin. Here we are, day 6. One more day. I went out for a run this morning and I'm trying to avoid social media because it's filled with lots of graphs and comparisons and numbers. After the run, I did catch the tail end of the White House briefing regarding what the task force is doing about the coronavirus. I thought it was pretty reasonable. However, the reporters who were asking questions, I found them a little bit annoying. They were behaving like a child because they're so focused on these numbers. This was promised. Has that been fulfilled? That was promised. Has that been fulfilled? In a sense, they were always questioning numbers of masks, numbers of ventilators, numbers, and the powers being, they were giving very solid answers and saying, hey, we have plenty. But the reporter, for some reason, insisted on hearing numbers. And I thought about my old cycling coach. I used to race bicycles back in the day. I used to be somebody just, local level, like local hero kind of deal. Nothing for anyone who is novice to cycling. Lance Armstrong and Engin is like way below. That's Lance Armstrong. However, I had amazing training partners who went to win Olympic medals and whatnot. So I'm blessed with that experience. But in that era, when I was trying to prove myself to my new environment in Idaho, I gained a friend. He still is a friend of mine, and this particular person, he is an expert in movement. Like, I don't have the correct English word for it, but it has something to do with kinesthesia. I need to look it up and learn how to pronounce that. But the human physics, and his father was affiliated with NASCAR. That's another school of movement because you're in an oval, so you're trying to do that as efficiently as possible so you have a leg up on the rest of the cars who somewhat share the same specs as yours does. This coach of mine has so from the time I started racing and when I ran into this very person, I'm not mentioning his name because I don't have his blessing to put him in my stories, because who knows what my stories are going to be. I still respect him, and if anybody's curious about who this person is, email me at bookofengin@gmail.com and I will reply. So he once said to me, Engin, numbers are for the weak-minded. I said, what do you mean by that? Because he knew that I had every single measuring tool available to mankind to monitor my progress during my training when I was racing bicycles. I had power meters, obviously your speedometer, the heart rate monitor, everything. I had all sorts of data. And we were having a beer when he told me that phrase, numbers are for the weak-minded, which to this day, I apply it to all aspects of my life. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, say you went out for a 2-hour ride, and he always promoted having a watch. He said, always have a watch on. Know where you are during the day. That's the only measuring tool you probably need for the rest of your life. Know where you are during the day. All you need is a watch for it. And now we have our phones, all that good stuff. So he said numbers are for the weak-minded, and say you went out for a 2-hour ride. And your only measuring tool that you'll be out for 2 hours is, say if you're going 1 hour out, 1 hour back, that's your 2-hour ride. All you need is a watch. Or if in your book, in your training log, if you have a ride that did last 2 hours, you can repeat that very ride without a watch, knowing you're going to be on your bicycle for about 2 hours. Simple calculation. He said, say you went on this 2-hour ride and you collected all the data with all the tools you have. Your power meter, your distance calculator, your heart rate, and then you put all this data on your computer after your ride. I said, okay. And he goes, say that ride did not go well that day. I said, all right, it's possible, it happens. And then after that ride, you're just gonna sit at home and stare at those numbers. The distance won't change, or maybe it will if you're doing an out and back, and if you're not feeling good, you'll probably won't travel as far as when you're feeling, a little springy and spunky. He said, on your power meter, your wattage is going to be low. Your heart rate is going to be probably higher than average because you're tired, you're not feeling good. And you're going to stare at those numbers. And those numbers are going to keep telling you you had a shitty day for the remaining of the day. So that's one scenario. And he says, imagine you just went out for a ride for 2 hours. And this is all you have, your watch. And you still had a not so stellar day on the bicycle. That's it. You hang your bike up, you take a shower, you eat a good meal, and you tell yourself, well, that bike ride wasn't that good. Hopefully, I'll have a better ride. You don't have this crazy amount of data that you can continue to stare at and put yourself off and most likely set yourself up for failure for the following day. Because you're going to take those numbers and you're going to brew on those numbers and you're going to hope to beat those numbers, and chances are that is going to give direction to that day, how you approach that day, starting with your attitude, long before how your muscles are going to fire or how your brain is going to fire. Your attitude is going to be flat because you have this data that you stared at all day long. But a simple ride that's 2 hours that you didn't feel that good about, but as soon as you take your shoes off and hang your bike on the wall, that ride is over. Now you can do something better with your day. Speaking of numbers, we're looking at numbers. Numbers are available, and who says those numbers? That's important. So many people are broadcasting numbers regarding what's going on and how things are going on. And who do you trust? And imagine if you spend the entire day, when we're all in this social isolation, staring at these numbers. And no number that are being posted are uplifting news. There is no such thing as uplifting news. When was the last time a news channel from top to finish gave uplifting news, like people's achievements, good things that have been discovered, things that has been cured, people regaining their health? Those are never in our conversations. Thus, this little juvenile reporter begging on the numbers, and in this such like, well, you told me this, you're talking to the president to begin with. Now, the next thing I'm going to say has nothing to do with my political view. hierarchy is necessary for a social community to function all together. And then there are ranks that have been established to create some sort of order. And if you're addressing the president, I think you need to watch your tone. Now, if you're addressing your boss at work, I do recommend you watch your tone. But after all, if you two get in a tussle at work, you probably don't like the place you work at. That's why you're picking a fight with your boss. Or else, if everything was honky-dory, why would you go pick a fight with your boss? Because essentially, deep inside, we all know the company that we work for doesn't care about us. We're just a number. Most likely your social security number, because that's where the paycheck comes from and all that stuff gets rigged and adjusted, so every 2 weeks you receive your paychecks. If you argue with your boss, nothing happens. Nothing happens. You may have just a shitty day, but that doesn't affect the rest of the world. You might get fired, and that still has something to do with your immediate surrounding. Again, has nothing to do with the rest of the world. But when you're addressing the President of the United States, I think that calls for some responsibility. Because others are listening, others are drawing their conclusions and setting their attitude forth. Banging on numbers and not liking the numbers, I wholeheartedly believe is going to affect an attitude in a negative way. And with negative attitude in a crisis that affects all of each and every one of us, we're going to be very, very alone. But these are the times we need to stick together. This is the time to love your neighbor. Someone posted on Facebook, I'm going to butcher it because I don't remember it fully, but the meme was, now you don't have television, you don't have work, you don't have all these responsibilities. Perhaps it's a good time to talk to God. I don't know. I talk to God all the time. So I grew up with it. And don't get me wrong. I'm not a good example for a, say, religious person or a spiritual person. But, you talk to, like, if you ask me why I talk to God when I'm alone, when I feel hopeless. And I realized at a much younger age, and thanks to my grandma, my dad's mom, we were talking about this, and she had asked me, like, do you talk to God? I said, I pray once in a while. She goes, when do you pray? I said, when I'm in a tight spot. And the way she approached it was, don't just do it in a tight spot, do it all the time. See how your life changes. Now, you don't have to talk to God, but you got to talk to somebody. Maybe in that attitude, you can change your attitude and talk to somebody. Talk to somebody that you haven't talked to. Talk to somebody perhaps that you've been avoiding to speak with. This is a good time. This is a great time to develop new habits. It's a good idea to make good choices because you can also develop bad habits. When I say develop habits, this lull time, there's just so much empty time, we are going to develop habits. And they're going to stick, believe me. Whatever we're doing right now with this lull time, it's going to stick. It's going to be around for a minute. I just kind reminder, make good choices, see what happens to you. We started with numbers are for the weak-minded. yeah, I just would stop looking at numbers because you have no control over those numbers. They're not going to change if you stare at them all day long or not. Be safe, be healthy, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Book of England is also available on iTunes right now. I just got approval for it. That was awesome. If you'd like to communicate and you don't want to do it in a public fashion, you can always email me at bookofengin@gmail.com, bookofengin@gmail.com. But yeah, feel free to leave a comment. Maybe that can spark up another conversation or two. Enjoy. Attitude is a muscle. It needs to be kept in good shape, and your attitude also determines whether you're in a rut or you're in the groove. Stay groovy.